Our guests are Greg DeLiso and Addison Binek, not Binek, but Binek. At that out of the way, now maybe we can finally talk about Psycho Ape 2, a movie Giles reviewed for us. And so Giles may have most of the questions to ask, but I will start us out. Guys, so I watched Psycho Ape 2 without having watched Psycho Ape 1, and I didn't feel like I missed anything. I probably missed some in jokes, but in general, Psycho Ape, the first movie, what can you tell us about it? Is it mandatory viewing for Psycho Ape 2? Recommended viewing? What can you tell us about Psycho Ape the first?
Addison, you want to take this?
I would say what I've been discovering is that it's not mandatory, but it's not a bad idea. But I have encountered a couple of people at screenings so far who seem to enjoy the movie on its own merits who have not seen the first one. Because the second one is played at a horror convention in Pittsburgh, and there was a guy after the show who found me in the hallway, told me he had never been to a horror convention before, never even saw the first movie, but he enjoyed the sequel on its own terms. The movie just played at a drive-in this past weekend in Indianapolis, and I mean it was a parking lot full of like 50 cars, and I mean everybody seemed to have a good time. I doubt all of those people even knew what Psycho Ape was, and they were being, treated to the sequel. And a lot of people ended up buying copies of the first movie. So I don't think it's mandatory. It's just more of the same kind of slapstick humor and stuff and crazy parody nonsense. But it's recommended. If you like the second one, you'll like the first one. They are two different kinds of movies, though, like tonally. Like the first movie is more of kind of a slasher movie or a parody of slasher movies, and it's kind of Trauma-esque or Ed Wood, and the second one's kind of a crazy gonzo meta parody like Gremlins 2 or something, making fun of the first movie.
Okay.
Yeah. No. I
Giles,
agree with all that.
Yeah.
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 Giles, any questions?
And don't undersell yourself. Some critics have gone so far as to compare you to Damon Packard, Stan Brakhage, and Jean-Luc Godard. So
I was really flattered by that comparison, and I've actually gotten to become pals with Damon in life. We're both big Los Angeles Kings fans, hockey fans, and so we love these last playoffs. 6 months ago in April, we were watching the first round of the playoffs together. And he's a really interesting guy. I'm really inspired by him. If anyone doesn't know, he made a groundbreaking underground film called Reflections of Evil in 2002. And he's made a bunch of other movies since then. A bunch of them are on Tubi. And he's a no budget inspiration. He's a true like mad genius, regular genius. I don't know how all around. So I appreciate the comparison. I hope, I guess I'm feeling like the comparison is because it's sort of these on the streets like things that have a certain kind of spontaneity to them or something. I mean, cause I'm so flattered, and I don't even know if I see it necessarily. It's funny about Godard too, because I flattered by that obviously as well. I mean, Brackage as well, of course, all three. But I was really big into watching the French New Wave in my early 20s, and I watched through a lot of it. And Godard definitely has this sort of madcap, bizarro meta comedy in some of his, especially the main period from like 1960 to like throughout the 60s, basically. So I don't know. I appreciate those comparisons a lot, but I don't know. I don't know what else to say. I appreciate it.
I have to say that I see the Packard and Goddard. I'm not sure where the brackage is coming from.
Specifically, I can't think of examples off the top of my head right now, but there was, I guess, some of the I'll call it kind of random footagey sequences sort of brought to mind because my primary exposure to Brackage was A Movie, I think was the title of whatever that short he did fairly early in his career, I think, that was just this collection of, stock footage and random snippets of this, that, and the other. So it was more of a vibe than perhaps a motif.
Well, there's something
with that ambiguity.
I mean, and I think Addison would agree with this, and we've talked about this. There is something just experimental about Psycho Ape 2, I guess. It takes pretty deep forays into just like total non sequitur nonsense, and it doesn't seem to have any regard for like any sort of traditional storytelling or plot or anything. Addison, I think you've described it before, where it's almost like anytime it comes up against a plot thing, it almost does this childish thing of like, really, do I have to do that? Like, I don't want to do that. And then it just sort of goes off into outer space even further as like a rebellion.
The movie is reluctant to tell a story. It doesn't really want to. It prefers to go outside and play. You know what I mean? Like, there's a whole 16-minute long sequence at the end where, we have like a series of dream sequences that, bear no, there's nothing, it has nothing to do with any sort of plot. And then there's a QVC commercial that's, selling its own merchandise. Then the characters venture off to the Venice boardwalk, and, one of the characters gets an ear piercing, and that eats up 4.5 minutes of the movie. But none of this has anything to do with like the courtroom stuff or any sort of copycat killer that we were sort of trying to set up. It has nothing to do with anything. And yes, it is a 16-minute long sequence that just sort of goes outside to play. It doesn't want to get back to the courtroom stuff for a very long time.
In that sense, it reminds me of Monty Python's Flying Circus specifically.
Yeah, it's sort of designed as like a series of sketches, almost like Kentucky Fried Movie or Monty Python and the Holy Grail, where we have an overall story kind of, but Greg and I sort of describe these movies as like a clothesline where we have a setup, but then everything that we sort of zip along is just an excuse to make gags and jokes and parodies of things. It's more of a Psycho Ape is a foundation. It's an entity to then go inside and mess around.
Okay.
And then it does. Yeah, to talk about the courtroom thing, I guess I'd say that is the actual movie. That's like the one sort of broader narrative that, as you so observe, you reluctantly return to, and then when you want to move on from that, you feel completely free so to do. So curious, I guess, for structurally, how long, like if we just had the courtroom cut, would that be even like a quarter of the movie?
I think it was like 10 pages of material, and it's probably is like, I don't know, all told together like 12 minutes or 15 minutes or something like that. I mean, maybe like almost a quarter of the runtime, probably. Does that sound right, Addison? I mean, that sounds right.
Yeah, I think so. I don't know. 'Cause, yeah, if you were to clip out all of the courtroom scenes and lay them out together, like in chronological order or something.
Yeah.
I have no idea. Because, yeah, Greg is the editor of both of these Psycho Ape films, so he would know more about that than I.
And I think, I don't know, somewhere between like 12 and I don't want to say 20, but yeah, 15 minutes of it probably. Yeah.
Sounds reasonable, because I'd say the longest is the beginning and the end. Like there's the introduction, which is probably a good like 5 minutes, and then the ending is like, I don't know, 5 to 7 minutes. But then there's just like sprinklings of it kind of throughout the movie. But I guess if you extracted them all and laid them all out, 12 sounds reasonable. 15.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah. So that gives a decent idea of the kind of scattered approach that you adopt for this. Now, there's a lot of aggrandizing of the first Psycho Ape, and I guess I'll emphasize there's an exclamation mark in that title. Obviously, you had your one foray there, which I haven't seen, the movie from 2020, which certainly started this vein of good nonsense. What upon completion of that and the reception for that, what were some of the main things that moved you toward thinking that a second installation was where you wanted to go?
Um, Addison. Well, I'm thinking. I mean, I guess you know.
It was gradual, you know. I mean,
Yeah.
I go to a lot of horror conventions and I sell DVDs. And Greg got the movie onto a streaming service called Night Flight Plus, and it's on Amazon Prime. And we kind of realized because we finished the first one in 2020, but that was like October of 2020 was when we released it. It played once in a movie theater here in Michigan, but then all of the movie theaters shut back down. And I got all the DVDs to backers and stuff, and then the movie kind of just selling it sporadically at conventions for about 2 or 3 years, but it sold really well. That was the thing, was that every time I go to a con, I'd sell like 20 to 30 copies, and then one day we crunched the numbers and it was like, wow, we've almost sold like 800 copies, 1,000 copies. Like, it's really up there. And if you go on like Letterboxd, there's about 248 reviews. And so it's like people have seen this movie, more people than we could ever fathom. And that became sort of the number one question I would get at conventions is, are you going to do another one? Are you going to do another one? Even the lead actress, Kansas Bowling, when she would go do other indie movies, people on those sets would come up to her and ask her specifically about Psycho Ape. And her and I just talked about this the other day because she was at the drive-in event that I attended. She's been in like Glenn Danzig movies. She worked with Tarantino, but the movie that was popping up on the sets of like Murder Size and other movies that she's worked on was Psycho Ape. That was the popular one. She had no idea that this movie was gaining a cult fan base because she just, this was a movie. She did it. Then she went on to do other things. So it's kind of circled back around. And once like news got out that like, yeah, we have like kind of a indie cult hit on our hands. That's when like Greg and Bill and Kansas kind of, came to me and they were trying to, get another one going.
Yeah, I mean, I've always been really kind of like astonished and humbled and proud and stuff that the first movie came out, like Addison said, the end of 2020, during the pandemic and stuff. And yes, it is on Night Flight Plus, it is on Amazon. But like there's no trailer, it's not on Tubi. It's it still is this like underground thing where you buy the DVD like through Addison basically. It's not like in stores or really like,
yeah, we never sold it to a distributor or anything. Like we never went to Wild Eye or any of these other, like Vertigo Syndrome or Severin. We still own it. It's still our movie and we never licensed it out. You can stream it on certain places, but if you want to buy a physical copy, it's like through me. But because I go to so many conventions and things, the movie's just gotten out there.
Yeah, and I've just been it's again so humbled and like proud that it in the few years since the first one it had enough legs in a fan base to where I think the first movie Addison did a Kickstarter, we asked for about 1,000 and raised like 7,000, which was the budget for the first one. And I think this time around we just made up a sort of pie in the sky number based on the fan base that we thought we had kind of built up over these few years, and we asked for 10,000, and we got to 14 by the time that we were in production. I think it's at like 17 now. And just to circle back, just actually to your question, you talk about the self-referentialness and the grandizing of the first movie. I think that for me, I'm a millennial, but growing up loving like Gen X comedy, like Mr. Show and stuff, or Spaceballs, where they're selling merchandise like for the movie in the movie somehow. As a little kid, that stuff really blew my mind, and I was always just obsessed with that meta layer. And I think it was always a very Gen X thing to sort of like point out like corporations like selling the kids and trying to be cool and look at all, look at these skateboard kids and we're going to market to them and here's a Pepsi and all that. So I think that went into at least my, probably Addison too, our comedy DNA. And so this like the still that you have up of we call it the QVC scene where they're just selling stuff from like the first movie.
Yeah. And
Yeah,
all of
just
this
that.
this
Yeah,
merchandise is real too. Like these weren't props that were made for the movie. Uh, Lunch Meat VHS, that's a real company. They made a line of like 50 tapes that you could have ordered, but they sold out. Trading cards, you can buy those from me, and then we did another run of VHS tapes that we did independently. So like all of this stuff, and then behind Kansas laying on the chair is a t-shirt. These are all real legitimate things. And they're all things that like we did, except for like that first run of tapes. Everything else was kind of like other manufacturers, other companies coming to us because they wanted to create these things. And so into the movie they went. Like it's just very bizarre that we didn't have to seek out, we didn't have to knock on any doors like, hey, can we get trading cards made, or hey, can we make VHS tapes? These companies came to us because they liked the first movie that much.
Nice. Well, we've spoken a little bit about the delightfully named actors Kansas Bowling. So if I might ask you about how you nabbed Bill Whedon for the first one, and obviously after the first one, judging from his performance in the second one, he was among those people demanding that this happen, since I don't know if I've ever seen an actor have as much fun on screen as Mr. Whedon does in Psycho 8 2. How'd you grab him? What was it like working with that trauma legend there?
Well, I prior to Psycho Ape, I did a show called Masterpiece Theater, which was like Mystery Science Theater meets Trauma, and I'd done an episode on Lloyd Kaufman's movie The Battle of Love's Return, and that episode played in a double feature with Sergeant Kabuki Man in New York. So the person who was putting on that show invited me out to New York and put me up in a hotel room with Bill. We were the guests of the evening. And we were in the pre-production stages of Psycho 8 2 during this time. And so Bill watched Masterpiece Theater. He thought the jokes were funny. And he asked me if I had anything else in the pipeline, if he could, if I was coming back around New York anytime soon, on planning on shooting Psycho Ape or anything there, to hit him up, and he would just be down for any kind of cameo. So when I got back home to Michigan, I told Greg about that, and Greg was the one who I think just said, like, well, let's offer him the role of Zoomis, because we didn't have a Zoomis, and it was barely a character. It was just like, well, he's going to be like a psychologist, zookeeper, sort of just like a Dr. Loomis character, but maybe like a dog catcher or something, a guy with a big net. There wasn't really much to him.
I think we had the safari suit for some reason, and it just did that, and even just the Zoomis and Zookeeper Loomis thing all fit together nicely for somehow.
Yeah. So I called up Bill because Bill had given me his number, and so then we were like writing the scripts one afternoon for Psycho Ape, and it was just like, okay, let's just call Bill. Let's see if he'll do this. Because once we sort of have him locked and we know that he's like down to do it, then we could just continue writing with him in mind. And that was a very easy phone call. He said yes, and it just kind of we went from there.
Yeah, and he did have the most fun, I think, of anyone ever. For as delightful and as bizarre, but there's nothing wrong with that. As you can imagine, he had all the fun possible, I think, on that set. Yeah, but I mean, if you see the movie, you'll know what I mean.
You see a lot of Bill in the movie.
Exactly.
Yeah. Very, very bold person. Very no holds barred in the sequel.
Yeah.
And as the text in the movie says in various spots, like this was Bill's idea.
Yeah.
That's not a joke. It might seem like a joke, but it's not a joke.
No, I believed it. Within having not seen the first one, but within minutes of seeing this Zoomis character, every on-screen advisement about him rang very true to me. So yeah, all told, a delightful addition, and great that he was so on board with what you were up to, and also I imagine very much making it what he wanted to get up to as well.
Yeah.
So it's there's an irreverence certainly throughout Psycho 2, but it's mellowed by a very laid back attitude, which I appreciate. In any movie that's doing what you're doing, this kind of relaxed, hey, we're just going to film and have fun kind of thing is, always, well, especially considering some of the more obscure and sometimes art house things that I stumble across. That is always a relief for me to see genuine joy in making a movie as opposed to other experiences where it's like, wow, this is a slog for me. I shudder to think what they're going through producing it. So yeah, excellent. Yeah, he is very good as himself as Dr. Zoomis there.
Yeah, Bill is great, and I appreciate that a lot. I mean, as Addison talked about me being the editor and stuff, we did have a lot of fun on set, but you also do have to like recreate that, too. I think part of what's fun about it to me is that if the breezier the end product looks, the more I feel like I did my job of like making it look that way. Because it's not that it wasn't that way, it was, but you still have to kind of like, it can't just be I'm closing my eyes and randomly having clips. Like it's got to be done somehow. And so when people comment on that, I just appreciate it a lot because it's a lot of hard work to get it to feel that way to other people. So
we obviously we could just plant the camera down and film one shot, one take of them hanging out for 15 minutes, but that would be boring as hell. So, if you notice in any scenes where they are like talking or hanging out, there's close-ups, there's coverage. So, Greg being the cinematographer as well can capture all of these moments in real time and then edit them together to make it look natural, to make it look like you're right there with these characters hanging out and doing stuff. But in actuality, there is like time passed by and he did move the camera around. But you're kind of tricked into thinking that it's all just happening in that moment, in that hangout session. But like there's a scene where they're all sitting around playing with the trading cards and playing with forming the puzzles, and Bill can't keep up with Kansas, and he's become really frustrated. That really was just us hanging out in Greg's backyard for like 12 minutes, and he cut that down to a 4-minute scene, and it's just kind of like chaotic and funny and weird. But that is just like us hanging out. It's more behind the scenes than a scene in a movie. And some people like it, some people don't,
I was going to ask about like approximately what percentage of the movie is improvised, because it like the scene you were describing it's felt improvised, and I suspected it
that was improvised. Yeah.
I always say with these things, there's Psycho 1. It's about half and half. I think sometimes people would be surprised to know some of the things that actually were written and actually follow the written word almost exactly to what they were. The courtroom material was all written.
We could not go into. There was no way we could show up to set and not have an idea of what we were doing. It was far too expensive to be there and to not know what we were doing.
Right. And so I sort of take pride in the fact that people can't tell the difference, though, because it means that the writing has an ear to the absurdity in the characters, but then also that means that the actors are dialed in too, because they can do both and you can't tell the difference. Like it basically all should feel improv, like a bunch of kids playing or just made up on the spot. But yeah, I would say at least 50% of each movie is just like actually written, and then the other 50% is just like, hey, I'm turning, like Addison said, turn the camera on and you guys just do some stuff and then we'll just play around. So it's about half and half. Yeah.
Yeah, speaking of ear and scripted, his name eludes me right now, and you actually make a joke about that, I think, immediately upon his introducing himself. The fellow from Firesign Theater.
Oh, gosh.
One of the newscasters. I'm actually, as a troupe, I'm familiar with them, but obviously, as I'm showing here, not necessarily familiar with the names behind the, collection of voices.
Sorry, his name is Philip Proctor.
Yeah.
And if you look him up, it's actually incredible. He was in like early Jack Nicholson movies that Jack directed, and he goes all the way back to the 70s. The Firesign Theater which is this thing that unfortunately younger people don't really know, but our sort of older millennials, Gen X, Boomer generation, either your parents had it or you had it. They were comedy albums, which to this day and age is almost kind of, I don't even know what I'm talking about, but it would be like a vinyl record, but it would be a comedy, and it wouldn't just be stand-up comedy. It would be like a troupe doing sketches and stuff in like a radio format or an audio format. And they were very big. They were very popular. I mean, to the point where if this was 1975, they might have been like a household thing. He had ended up after that. Philip Proctor had a long career doing voice work for like Pixar. He was actually one of the supporting leads in Rugrats for the entire run of the show. He was Phil and Lil's dad, so not one of the main babies, but like one of the main adults. So he's been in a million things.
I think he was in every like Pixar movie, like from the 90s and early 2000s. I think he was in like all three Toy Story and Ratatouille and like A Bug's Life. He's just, his voice work, stretches like far and wide. He and his origin, like how we got him in the movie, was actually he and Bill attended college together. Like they became friends, and they've been friends ever since.
I think they both went to Yale.
Yes,
together.
that was right. Yes, they went to Yale together, and they kept in contact. And so, as a favor to Phil, Bill just asked him to be a part of the movie, and so he came in, hadn't seen the first film, and we just sort of sat him and Dolores down, Dolores being Bill's wife, just sat them down in front of a black curtain and just had them rattle off news reporter stuff.
And Dolores was great too. They were both great. It was such an interesting honor to get to work with both of them and work with Phil, because I had like never knew him by name, but I guess I knew of his stuff through my whole childhood. I mean, I watched Rugrats in the 90s when I was a kid and stuff. It was very interesting. And yeah, I think that is an interesting thing, that there's kind of, in a weird way, this comedy legend guy in the movie, in the kind of movie that really celebrates the kind of comedy that he was doing. But I think it's unfortunately somewhat lost on most audience people and stuff, and even kind of us, because again, I didn't know what
Fire Sign Theater was.
Okay.
I had no clue. The only that wasn't us like seeking out a comedy legend, like, oh, we have to get one of the guys from Fire Sign. He just happened to be an old friend of Bill's.
Yeah.
I noticed, I did not realize, I thought you guys, I heard Firesign Theater, I thought you guys were just throwing out a reference. I didn't realize I was really one of the Firesign Theater troupe guys.
Yeah.
And I myself am not, Firesign Theater is someone who I'm not familiar with myself, but it seems like every comedy group that I like is always referencing Firesign Theater.
They're amazing, amazing group.
Church of the Genius.
I don't know if the audience can see, but I actually found these at my parents'
house. Yep.
So the camera can see me. So this is one of their albums, and I'm gonna point out. So this is Phil of the bunch. It's these guys. And yeah, I mean, their whole, again, these are just like their whole record albums. I found this other one too. So I have two. But
my father's a big fan, so I got that from him.
Very cool. Well, that's cool. I'm so glad that it's really cool, and I'm so glad
that's kind of the first. This is the first time where someone's known what Fire Sign is, because it was coincidence. It was just sort of, we got this guy who was like a friend of Bill's as the news reporter, so it was okay, cool. We filled the role. And it's like, oh, he has a rich history of comedy. And we had no idea.
Yeah.
Okay, well, that certainly is great to hear, at least for me and anyone else out there familiar with Fire Sign. I imagine Penguin Pete must be familiar with those good people, so he'll be interested in this. To scale it to a very different sort of a production side, we've spoken to a lot of people who've used like GoFundMe and other styles where, you get sort of a whole different bunch of random backers. I wonder if you might be able to talk just briefly about what that's like, and what kind of promises and what kind of shall we say, because that will make probably some limitations on what would otherwise be total creative ability.
Well, for the first movie, like Greg said, we didn't really know how much money we could raise for a film like Psychowave. It was my first feature film, and prior to that, I had just done sort of riffing stuff, like movies to watch on a rainy afternoon. I did that for like 10 years. It's like a 20-minute review show, just reviewing cheesy B movies. And then I did for Masterpiece Theater for Troma, but now feature length riffing movies. And so then when we went to go raise money for Psychowave, I only asked for $1,000, just not really knowing like what we would raise if we would raise 1,000. And that thing took off, and we brought in $7,000 for us, the first Psychowave movie. It was kind of a learning experience, getting everybody's perks to them. Again, it was during COVID. So a lot of overseas stuff got seized and people like weren't getting their stuff, and that was a big pain. But I learned, how to raise money, and fulfill backer rewards and make sure that everybody got their stuff, and learned like what sells, like what kind of perks you can sell and which ones like people don't go for. So then by the time we got to Psychowave 2, we doubled our budget. We went from 7,000 to 14,000. And this time around, we offered more perks than the first time around, like executive producer perks, associate producer perks, submit some footage of yourself for like $250 and we'll plug it into the movie. Or for a little bit more money, you could actually come to the set, which some people did. And so some of the cameos in the movie are from people who either like drove up from Arizona to be in the film, or were just local, Los Angeles talent who wanted to be in the film. And so, that was something that we didn't do on the first movie, like submit footage or be a part of production. But so, you offer perks like that and people go for them. It does, you get money for that. And it's a good idea. And like posters and the trading cards and Blu-rays and tapes. So all of this stuff was offered as part of perks. And people, they really went for like practically everything, T-shirts. And that's how we were able to raise $14,000.
I think the cool thing about crowdfunding in its simplest way to describe it is that fans of the project can basically pre-order a copy of something that they, it's not done yet. They don't have a guarantee that it's good, but they can pre-order it if they're a fan of the existing thing. And they can pre-order merch. They can pre-order stuff they like. And those pre-order sales just fund the movie itself. And so one sort of tricky thing, and for people that are starting out and doing this to try to account for, is like, you have to make these product to sell. So you need to have enough money left over once you've budgeted for the film to be able to fulfill the orders that, if you kind of something that we are still somewhat learning, but we're doing a decent job, is like, you shoot the movie with what you have, and then you go off and fulfill the stuff. So I think we're getting our orders out. I don't have any data on any of this, but I think we're doing it as well as any other production. And I think the other thing,
yeah, we pre-sold like 160 Blu-rays plus like 40 more DVDs, and so that's 200 physical media copies of the movie that need to get to people. And I whittled that down to about 40 Blu-rays left to go. So it's been a long process getting everybody their movies.
But it's good. And I think so far people are happy to get their stuff. The other thing that Addison mentioned about people buying cameos. So this has become kind of a trend in this little DIY backyard movie scene that we're all kind of in. And it's a cool thing where people basically can help to finance the movie by chipping in a couple $100, and they get to also be in the movie. And maybe that's their dream or something they want to do. I won't really give away the way that we did it in Psychowave 2, but I think like anything else, we did it in our sort of goofball kind of class clowny kind of way. And I just, we're really grateful to all the people that donated stuff. There were some really clever submissions, people that really made some really cool things, some really funny things. we're honored to have that stuff in the movie, and we hope that they get a kick out of it and kind of understand the way that we presented it as all like in good fun and stuff. But that was a particularly kind of fun sequence to do, and to also, we really appreciate these people that donate this stuff, and we support that. We're happy to have the support, and so yeah, I don't know,
Yeah.
All right.
Greg, you got a penultimate question, Greg?
Yeah, no, I've got a couple penultimate questions. I wanted to make sure that we inform the audience how they can get a copy of or see Psycho Ape 2. Do they have to go to your Indiegogo page? Is
They
that the
can.
only way?
The Indiegogo is still active, and you can pre-order from there. Or I have an eBay page that has like all the Psycho Ape stuff, 1 and 2. So you can get copies either way.
One is on Night Flight Plus.
Mhm.
Both of them are on something called Rewindo. It's a really
Oh
cool
yeah.
app that is totally affordable. It's like $7 or $8 a month. It's got a ton of really cool, rare, weird stuff on it, especially for like VHS collectors. So both movies are on that one. The first one is on Amazon and Night Flight Plus. You can order a DVD or Blu-ray of basically each of them. I don't think the DVD for 2 is out yet, but you can order them through Addison's eBay. All our merch is basically Googleable, and I think we have a link tree out there floating around somewhere. But there's trading cards, there's T-shirts, there's VHS tape, there's DVD, Blu-ray, and all that stuff is available. And it's all pretty easily find with Google, or you can go through Addison's Facebook or just contact him.
Yeah, I post about this stuff pretty regularly just because I am trying to keep it alive and active. And I go to a lot of conventions, and I always bring my stuff with me. It's like half the table is Psycho Ape stuff, and the other half is all of my work prior to Psycho Ape. But I try to get everything out there as much as possible. Psycho Ape 2 DVDs will be available eventually. It's just that the movie was shot in 4K, so we wanted to make the coolest Blu-ray possible. Again, I've seen the movie projected at drive-in. It looks amazing. I went to a movie theater in Michigan. They projected the Blu-ray right on a big screen. It looks immaculate. It's amazing. This scrappy little goofy movie, shot in 4K, projected on a giant screen though. It's like this movie shouldn't look this good, but it does.
All right. We're probably not going to have time for our final question, but I am going to let you, if you can, in the last 45 seconds, do you have anything coming up that you need to pitch? Anything new that you'd like to?
I have a movie that I shot a year prior to Psycho Ape 2 called Bad Brain that Kansas Bowling, Bill Wheaton are both actually in as well, but kind of a bunch of other cool people. And I'll be doing a finishing funds campaign for Bad Brain coming up pretty soon in the next couple months.
Okay. Addison?
I'm just promoting Psycho Ape 2 right now, going to as many conventions and screenings as possible.
Okay, great. Well, we are about out of time, so thank you very much, Greg DeLiso and Addison Binek.
Thanks for having us, and thank you for the great review.
Thank you.
Track down Psycho Ape 2, and we'll see you next week, guys. Stay weird. Bye-bye.
Thanks again.
All right. Did it go off? Is it?
Weird. Yeah, I guess that is the word for it. Weird.